I'd like to talk to you now about the picture now that the cleaning is more or less finished. You can see the work that we talked about previously, where I'd been reducing the old discolored varnishes and taking away historic retouchings which had discolored, has now been completed across the whole of the painting surface. And it's been given a temporary varnish, and the cleaning is more or less where we'd like it to be. You can see evidence of some changes in format that happened during the course of the picture's subsequent life. That is to say, probably around 100 years ago, was glued onto another canvas that is relined. Some decisions were made at that time to kind of change the way the composition worked by taking what had been the folded over turnover edge that went around the original stretcher and folding it out, extending it, putting this white filling on the raw canvas, and then you remember from before there was a dark line of paint which had been put on probably in the 19th century to match this background, to change the composition, to make it less packed and dense. It's a really interesting aspect of many of Artemisia's paintings from this period, that she seems to favor these very tightly cropped compositions, and that's something we'll have to think about as we carry on with our work. We're looking very much to restore what we believe to be something like the original format, based on all sorts of technical evidence about the cusping, that is to say the evidence of the canvas being pulled closer to the edge of the original format, and also looking at other paintings and being guided by what we can see from the composition here. So although we know that she favored tight crops in this period, we believe there's probably missing a little bit here, because we find it quite improbable that this jewel that you see cut off at the moment wouldn't have been depicted by Artemisia in her painting. So now you see the work with all the varnishes I cared to remove reduced or taken away, most of the old retouchings taken down, and you see the picture in something like the clearest example of its actual state of preservation. So in fact, for a picture of its age, it's actually in very good condition. You do see evidence of old damages. Of course, we've talked about this tear, this impact that went through the canvas and the lining canvas that will require us to reline the picture. And there's evidence of old losses, probably caused by the lining, where the seam of the two bits of canvas Artemisia joined have slightly raised, and during that relining I think there's been some paint loss here and some occasional losses and small impact damages. But on the whole, the picture's in very, very good condition. You understand the way she's so carefully controlled the lighting, the fall of light, the manipulation, the orchestration of color intensities, the relationship of red, white, and blue, and the flesh tones. The fact that the most intense, pure, highest color is of the sleeve, which is the closest thing to you, which in a frame I think will have an amazing impact, sort of nearly resting on the edge of the frame. All these things, the slight glint of the highlight on that metal part of the Catherine wheel, all these things are working now in relationship to one another very much as Artemisia intended. I think some of the improvements we could see as we started with the cleaning have now been carried out across the whole surface, and it's quite exciting to think about how we can read the picture and understand her intentions much more clearly. I think the manipulation of the relationships of red, white, and yellow, and the way that they're kind of echoed in the subtle shifts of yellow and pink and orange tones in her flesh. That's a kind of relationship, the way they kind of lock together is very exciting. We talked a little bit about the manipulation of light and dark and what that means for the kind of sculptural impact of the work. And so these things where we see these dark voids where this yellow drapery curves in around behind with the translucent effect of the veil above, the way that the wheel tilts back in space and there's a much darker void again behind the drapery, which itself is in shadow. All those kinds of things that she's orchestrated so cleverly are much more visible now. Even this little tiny hint of the bright yellow drapery that's emerging and catching the raking light, which makes it clear that it's this same fabric going around These kinds of things, I think, are really quite legible now, and it will be really exciting to see when the restoration, the retouching itself is completed and you can see it without the interruption of these old glosses. This also is the moment when we start to step up our collaborative research, our investigation with the scientific department and my curatorial colleagues to look at how this painting relates to other works, both in terms of how it's made and just the more artistic intent and ideas about how she does achieve the effects she's created here, both in terms of the way the composition works, thinking about the buildup of paint, changes, compositional alterations. You see, for example, here along the shoulder, there's a slight tweaking of the contour, which is an interesting thing. Just all these kind of tiny adjustments at the end as she's thinking about how the picture's working, how she might just do little improvements and move it along as the composition develops. So it's an exciting time. I think we'll be looking more at her technique and materials. For example, we'll want to find out more about pigments that are used. This red lake, that is to say this translucent red glaze, which is usually an organic material, is probably faded somewhat, but we want to find out more about that to get a better sense of the original color relationships, which are quite intact but slightly changed. Among other things, it's the moment where we really step up that kind of investigation. And now with the cleaning phase of the treatment substantially finished, it'll be time to start the structural work. And my colleagues will be talking to you about this in a week or two to come. But what we're going to be doing is taking off the old relining, that is the 19th century canvas, which has been glued to the back of Artemisia's canvas. We'll be taking that away and replacing it, doing repairs of this tear and putting it on a new canvas backing. But you'll be hearing more about that from my colleagues in the next installment of our progress reports on the treatment to date.